Wilt Chamberlain. There are very few people who can say that they lived a life half as entertaining as the one that he would go on to live. See, the more and more I learn about the man, the more and more amused I become with his persona overall. As on this channel so far, we've talked about who the real Wilt Chamberlain is and kind of demythed some of the lies that plague his name. We also talked about Wilt Chamberlain's bizarre rivalry that he held with another all-time great, Kareem Abdul Jabbar. Now, in this video though, we're gonna be taking things a little further, as we're gonna be taking a look at the guy who Wilt Chamberlain was ready to risk it all in order to go up against. We're gonna be taking a look at multiple-time heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali. To start, there is more to this than you think. When talking about Wilt Chamberlain and Muhammad Ali, you have to keep in mind the times in which these events were taking place. These particular events were taking place throughout the late 60s and the beginning of the 70s, the years following the end of segregation, a time for Muhammad Ali that was defined by what would go down as the biggest fight of not just his boxing career, but the biggest fight of his entire life. His fight with the government of the United States of America. See, Muhammad Ali had recently switched his name from Cassius Clay, which was the name of the slave owner who owned Ali's family, to of course, Muhammad Ali. A change brought about thanks to Ali discovering the Nation of Islam and relating heavily to the causes in which they claimed to uphold. The main one being a better, more enriched life for those who were brought to the country in bondage and were forced to work the land. And as you might guess, this move by Ali to cast aside the great name of Cassius Clay, who was one of the most respected and well-known plantation owners of his time, in favor of joining up with the quote Muslim terrorists as they were known, didn't sit so well with the majority of the public nor the United States government itself. Since because of this move, Ali, who was one of the biggest celebrities in the world at the time, was now seen as a traitor and a conspirator against the nation. With that being the case, it didn't take long for the nation and the people to exact their revenge on the heavyweight champion. The United States had already begun its war with Vietnam, yet the country, who had no problems inspiring its men to fight during previous wars, was now facing the problem of not enough people voluntarily shipping off to fight a war in which no one was sure why it was being fought in the first place. So with this being the case, the US began forcing its eligible male citizens to fight for the cause via the draft. And this is where the story gets crazy, since many conspiracy theorists over the years believed that the US intentionally used the draft to target Ali. Some proof used to back up this claim was the fact that before the war against Vietnam, in order to be eligible to serve the country, men had to score about 30 points on an aptitude test that was 100 questions long. Ali had only answered 16 of those 100 questions correctly, about half of what was normally required to be drafted into the army. For the purposes of this war though, the government lowered their standards, saying that now all men had to do was correctly answer just 15 of the 100 questions right. Coincidence? Like I said, most conspiracy theorists think not. Still, regardless of speculation surrounding the seemingly coincidental nature of Ali's being chosen to serve his country, the truth of the matter was that Ali, just a couple of years removed from his triumphant roar that he was the greatest, would now have to go to war for a nation whose people would eagerly await for word of his death on the battlefield. Or at least, that's what they thought. Ali, though, had other plans in mind, as he decided to announce to the world that he had no intentions of going to war in Vietnam. He rejected the United States government. Now, if the people and the government already hated Ali enough for his public displays of freedom, then the level of hate that they held for him after he refused to go to war for them was unfathomable. The amount of death threats that Ali was receiving via mail and over the phone began to skyrocket, some sending the severed head of a black dog, and others sending black dolls with nooses around their necks, most of which were signed with Confederate flags warning Ali of what would happen should he step foot onto their city's soil. Seeing the public's response to the situation, some of those around Ali pleaded with him to change his mind, knowing that continuing his fight with the country would end his career as a boxer due to the 5 years that he would have to spend in prison. At the time, Ali was already 25 years old, meaning best case scenario, he'd be out by the time he's 30, and it would be impossible for him to regain the foot speed that he had now while he's at his peak. Still, Ali refused, saying that he wasn't going to let them send him 10,000 miles away to die fighting people who wanted to be a part of the war just as little as he did, saying that if he was going to die, that they could kill him right now. He was adamant. he was holding to his conviction. A conviction which at first got him convicted, as the courts found Ali guilty in a unanimous decision, the jury only taking 21 minutes to make up their mind, sentencing him to 5 years in prison, as well as handing down a $10,000 fine. Muhammad Ali, though, appealed the court's decision, asking the Supreme Court to overturn the ruling since he felt that it was a breach of his religion to be sent to war. Released from jail on bail, it still took the Supreme Court over 3 years to hand out their verdict on Ali's appeal. Meanwhile, he was stripped of his boxing license, prohibited from working a job of any kind on US soil, while also being banned from leaving the country, meaning that he couldn't take a fight somewhere else to earn money while he waited. And waited. Each year being another year off what was supposed to be the best year of a boxer's career. More importantly, unable to get into the ring with an opponent, his skills would begin to dull as well. Eventually though, the verdict came in. It may have taken a bit more time than usual for Ali to defeat this opponent, but eventually he did. Muhammad Ali won his fight with the US government. Like any fight though, this one as well took a toll on Ali. Like I just said, he didn't emerge from it the same fighter as he was before. Before his 3-year ban, Ali was considered to have the fastest punch and the quickest, lightest feet in the world. After his fight with the government though, that was gone. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, saying that before, Ali was nearly impossible to hit in the ring. Now, he was more flat-footed. That didn't matter all too much to Ali though. Now that he was able to box again for the first time in years, he didn't waste much time going after what else had been stolen away from him besides his time, his championship belt. A belt that was currently being worn by a friend and rival, Joe Frazier. Now, like Ali, Joe Frazier as well would go down as one of the greatest to set foot in the ring. With a record of 26-0 heading into the fight, no man alive at the time could say that they were able to get the best of Smokin' Joe. And most of the nation really loved him. Unlike Ali, he hadn't given up his name and taken on a new religion. More importantly, he didn't dodge the draft. Not that he was called to serve or anything, but not being called to serve and not serving made you a heck of a lot better than the guy who was called to serve and refused. Well, to most at least. And that is why when Ali was exiled, the media began branding Frazier as a man fighting for the establishment, with eventual host of The Tonight Show, Bryant Gumbel, even asking the question, is Joe Frazier a white champion in black skin? Frazier though, never consented himself to that role. He never did or said anything to imply that he was for the establishment and the way things currently were within the country. Those claims were actually far from the truth. Like previously mentioned, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were pretty close behind the scenes. Besides Frazier helping Ali out financially due to his inability to make money during his troubles with the government, the two of them also schemed endlessly behind closed doors. Their main scheme being to build up so much anticipation for the two of them fighting that they would have to lift the ban and pardon Ali solely based upon the amount of money that would be on the table if the two of them fought. And it worked. The only downside being that it might have worked too well. The media portraying Frazier as pro-establishment or as being a quote Uncle Tom as it was referred wasn't bad enough, then Ali, the man who was clearly seen as anti-establishment, using that same narrative against Frazier during their attempts to build up anticipation, only stirred the pot to levels that were now more threatening to Frazier's life than the whole premise of boxing in the first place. Because of Ali's taunts, verbal jabs, and insinuations that Smokin' Joe was indeed an Uncle Tom, those who aligned their beliefs to that of Ali's began to hate Frazier's guts. So much so, in fact, that he had begun receiving various death threats saying that if he were to beat Ali in the upcoming match, that his life would be forfeit. They didn't want to see the man who was sticking up for what they believed in defeated by a man who was thought to be the enemy. And while that's how it may have seemed to others, the fight now carried a completely different purpose to Joe Frazier. The media making Joe out to be a fighter for the establishment is one thing. However, the person who he thought was his friend and the person who he helped convince the US that he shouldn't be in prison, making him out to be pro-establishment, was another. Frazier was furious. He had once respected Ali for the stance that he took against the government. After this though, he now started to see Ali for who he really was. Which is why years later, when Frazier recalled the events in his autobiography, he wrote that Ali had been secretly jealous that he was now wearing the belt that used to be his, and that his act of being a shining hero for blacks in America was a lie. He merely used the fact that he was black to get his way, while all along, all he really cared about was himself. Ali felt that he had become as big as, if not bigger than God, and now it was Smokin' Joe's responsibility to bring him back down to earth. That's according to Frazier anyways. And Ali for sure did have his dark side, a side that would make you rethink everything you believed before, a side littered with lies and heaped ton of personal self-best interest without regard for those around him. Muhammad Ali wasn't perfect, far from it actually, but that part of his story is going to have to be saved for a future video. For now, Ali was getting ready to try and win back his belt from a man who now had every incentive in the world to make sure he didn't lose. Death threats or not, nothing was going to stop Frazier from handing out his own form of justice to the guy he felt stabbed him in the back. On March 8th, 1971, at the sound of the bell, the first of 15 grueling rounds in which Frazier and Ali will be forced to inflict massive amounts of short-term and long-term damage to each other began. Much like the days of the Roman gladiators, the crowd at the event, fueled by raging testosterone, chanted away as the blows began to exchange. Each passing round, the fighters grew warier and warier, their senses discombobulated due to the series of impacts that the human body wasn't meant to receive. Broken jaws, ribs, swollen eyes, bruised kidneys were all apparent. After this fight, Ali and Frazier would both end up urinating blood for weeks. As bad as that might be, getting hit wasn't the only source of pain, since hitting your opponent could be equally as painful. Muhammad Ali himself began having problems regarding his hands and the damage that was done to them by throwing so many punches, problems that will plague him for the rest of his life. Speaking of which, none of this is to mention the amount of long-term damage that was being done, as with each blow the fighters' brains would bounce around in their skulls like loose change, damaging it in ways that would only become apparent after their fighting days came to an end. No one was thinking about this at the time though, not the people in the audience cheering them on as the damage was being done right before their eyes, nor the people inflicting the damage in the first place. Neither Muhammad Ali or Joe Frazier could back down. To them, this fight was much bigger than just a means of entertainment like it was for those who were watching. To them, this fight was a fight where they'd had to be willing to die if they were to come out alive. Finally, after all 15 rounds had run their course, the fight was over. Both fighters too weak and banged up to stand as they awaited the judges to make their decision. And that decision was that Joe Frazier unanimously defeated Muhammad Ali in Ali's attempt to regain the belt that was stripped away from him over 3 years ago. For the first time in his boxing career, Muhammad Ali knew the humiliation of defeat. The humiliation that Ali suffered through this defeat though didn't douse his fire to be the best as much as it did stir it on. Just because he lost didn't mean that he was ready to give up the title of champion of the world forever, which is why only 40 minutes after being checked into the hospital so he could begin his recovery from the bout, Ali checked himself out. He didn't want the fans or Frazier to think that he had been injured badly enough to require him to stay confined to the hospital bed for weeks, even though he had been. He wanted to play it cool, shake it off, make it seem like he was fine and ready for a round two. A round two that he was already planning in his mind. Though before he got that second chance to enter the ring with still reigning champion of the world Joe Frazier, Ali would once again have to work his way back up, defeat other opponents, and once again prove to the world that he was worthy of another shot at the belt. And one of the first opponents that Ali would look to get in the ring against would be an opponent who would be entering into the ring for the first time in his life: Wilt Chamberlain. Now this time in 1971 actually wasn't the first time that the idea of a Wilt vs Ali fight had come up, as the first time it came up was in 1965, and the only thing that stopped Wilt from going through with the idea back then was one of the owners of the Philadelphia 76ers handing down an ultimatum for Wilt to either continue his career as a basketball player or go into boxing. Wilt decided to stay with basketball. The second time though was actually in 1967, right during the time when Ali's troubles with the government were beginning. It really seemed like the fight was going to happen until Ali and his team backed down. Ali's manager was reportedly said to have become worried after seeing Wilt's size for the first time in person. Ali was a very big man. At 6'3", 215 pounds, he was bigger and taller than most of the people he fought in the ring. Compared to Wilt though, at 7'1" and 275, Ali seemed like a lightweight. not to mention the strength. Chamberlain may not have been trained as a boxer, but that doesn't mean that you want to be on the receiving end of a punch from a guy who regularly lifted cars alongside the Californian roads and flung NBA players around like sacks of feathers. The third time, though, was when it was 100% thought to be going down. Cus D'Amato, a very well-respected trainer in the boxing world, later going on to work with legends such as Mike Tyson, was now set to train Wilt. And he wasn't training him merely for the publicity of the fight. He thought Wilt had a real shot to beat Ali. D'Amato strongly believed that NBA players in particular could have a smooth transition to the sport of boxing because of the high level of foot speed and agility that was already required to play basketball. Not only that though, Wilt had an advantage when it came to the fact that he would have plenty of Ali fights to study in order to prepare, while Ali had nothing. Wilt's fighting style would remain a mystery right up until the day of their match. D'Amato said he just needed 6 months. 6 months of excruciatingly demanding practices will be enough to turn Chamberlain into a fighter capable of taking down the former heavyweight champion of the world. And while that may have been D'Amato's outlook on the fight, the rest of the world had a very different view on the situation. Everyone thought that Wilt was going to get embarrassed should he go through with it. Not a single person was expecting Chamberlain to win. Even his dad, who was an avid fan of Ali and boxing, said that his son would have been better off using his time practicing his free throws as opposed to stepping into the ring with Ali, also urging him not to go through with it due to the real possibility that Ali could kill him in a fight. Wilt, though, wasn't going to back down. He thought it was Ali, not himself, who was in over his head. As for Ali, after his loss to Frazier, he was simply rearing to fight someone else. He didn't care who it was. Not to mention that though Wilt claimed the two of them were somewhat friends, they weren't on the best of terms. Chamberlain had once called into question just how smart of a man Muhammad Ali was, saying that he would probably struggle mustering the brain power just to write down a couple of coherent sentences. Ali, on the other hand, similarly to how he did Frazier and many other prominent black figures in society, took to calling Wilt an Uncle Tom, due to the fact that Wilt once said he preferred dating white women. The world's tallest Uncle Tom, Ali proclaimed of Chamberlain, and that's what made him unable to cope with Bill Russell both on and off the court. So with that being said, the agreement was signed. On July 26th of 1971, Wilt Chamberlain would enter the world of boxing. The rules of the fight were simple. It was to be a 12-round fight with Chamberlain set to receive a guaranteed $500,000, while Ali was set to make a guaranteed $1 million. Besides the amount of money that was to be made though, one other thing was now clear. One way or another, at least one career would be coming to an end that night. If Wilt lost to Ali, it could have been in a manner that prevented him from further playing basketball or even took his life completely. If Ali lost, his image as a boxer and as the so-called champion of the world would be shattered into millions of pieces. Never again would he be taken seriously in the ring after losing a fight that the president of the Boxing Association deemed to be making a joke out of the sport. Ali, though, wasn't very concerned with the probability of himself losing. Boxing required way more than just strength, height, and reach, all categories that favored Chamberlain. Ali knew another very important part of the sport was knowing how to take a hit, being able to quickly shake off the jarring feeling of taking a blow straight to the head. And the ability to shake off those hits is something that you had to train for, something that you had to experience firsthand, which is why Ali always made a point to let his sparring partners deliver multiple hard blows to both his body and his head during his practice session. No matter how much training Wilt Chamberlain did up to the fight, there was no possible way that he'll be able to master the art of taking blows the way Ali had. Unless Wilt could land a hit that knocked Ali out cold, the odds were that Chamberlain would certainly lose. And that's a fact that became very apparent the closer and closer the day of the fight grew. Though Chamberlain and Ali both had signed an agreement to fight each other, come time to sign the actual contract to fight, Wilt had enough people in his ear letting him know that if he gets into the ring with Ali, that there's a strong chance that he won't be coming out, to cause Wilt to be a little more than just hesitant to sign it. He began complaining about the amount of money that he was set to make from the fight, as he thought the $500,000 was $500,000 after taxes, not before. When Ali heard that Wilt was considering backing down because of the money, he offered Wilt to split everything 50-50. He really wanted this fight. It was another opportunity for him to go up against someone who he helped label as an Uncle Tom, and also help repair his bruised ego from the Frazier fight. In the end though, Chamberlain couldn't go through with it. For him, the risk simply didn't outweigh the reward. the fight was off. And no matter how you look at it, that was probably for the best, since no matter what, had Wilt Chamberlain and Muhammad Ali fought, only one of them would have exited the ring with their life still intact. The other would have been either dead or have received enough damage to their ego from which they would never fully recover. And the story doesn't actually end here either. Well, it does for the chances of Ali and Chamberlain entering the ring together. However, the story of Muhammad Ali is one that is so monumental that all that has to be said about it could not possibly be contained in just one video. So with that being the case, make sure you stick around for part 2 of a saga that is jam-packed with, as Ali would say, so many thrills it'll give you the chills, right up until the very end. Until then though, keep getting the buckets, Team STC, and I'm out of here. Peace!